Hello, hello, hello. By now, as you are all watching this Continuing Conversations, episode 144, your greasy little mitts have probably been all over your 2E, well, PDFs at least, and maybe some of you post-Gen Con actually have the physical books, or maybe some of you by the time this airs in September, early September, some of you might have the hard copies. I hope I get mine soon. Jim's the only one who's been rubbing it in my face so far that he has his. And so we're here, of course, to talk about 2E. He's pointing at it for those of you who are looking on YouTube. He's rubbing it in my face. I'm Michael Dismuke, wearing this cool Moray shirt that looks like Captain's Log. If I move like this, it looks really cool, like the TOS version. I look like Spock is looking at me on a screen. I'm a blogger on Continuing Missions, which is the #1 site for Star Trek Adventures and Captain's Log. I'm also a lead writer for Captain's Log and a freelance writer for Modifius' Star Trek Adventures line. And of course, this is never a show unless we have with us Jim Johnson.
Hey everybody, Jim Johnson. I am the project manager and line editor for the Star Trek Adventures RPG and the Captain's Log solo RPG. And now that it's been announced, it'll be a month plus since when this episode comes out. But Modifius announced the Buffer Time Lower Decks card game. So I was the project manager for that as well. Got to add a card game to my resume, which is kind of cool. I'm looking forward to that coming out. Hopefully people get super excited about that.
Congrats.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Also working on my fiction writing, but that's not important for the purposes of this here episode. Been co-host on this podcast for 2+ years now. 147 you said? Wow, man. We're closing on 150.
144, yeah.
Well on our way to 200, man. Unreal. And as always, we have a all-star cast of writers with us here tonight. Writers, developers, folks who've been with the game line for a long time. In Aaron's case, from the beginning. Chris, I think you might have been there near the beginning too, if I remember. I'd have to go back and look at my credit pages, but I know you've been a long timer as well. So I'll just introduce them. No newbies here, so these are all veterans. We'll skip the usual new people questions and we'll just jump right into it. So Aaron, why don't you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I'm Aaron Pollyea, a long-term contributor to Star Trek Adventures. I'm kind of your science, technology, engineering, starships guy.
Awesome. Thank you, Aaron. Always a pleasure having you here. And Al, introduce yourself. I know you got some big news, so please don't be shy in sharing it.
How's it going? Al Spader. I'm a freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures. I was the lead writer on the Federation Klingon War Tactical campaign. I'm also a game designer of my own. I released Sentience 2D20, and hopefully this week on Drive Through RPG, you will be able to pop in and check out Once Upon, a storybook role-playing game with a system that I developed known as the Threshold system.
Very cool. I'm looking forward to it because I saw you were kind enough to send me some of the preview pages and it looks super cool. So I can't wait to see it in its full-throated glory. And last but not least, we have Chris McCarver with us tonight. Chris, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Chris McCarver. I, like Jim said, I've been on the Star Trek Adventures line since 2018, starting with the Operations Division book. I've written about 9 things for the game, including, pursuant to today's discussion, the intro adventure for 2nd edition. And pardon if I look a little lagged because I just got back from Gen Con.
And that's a perfect segue because you, I think, unless I missed a memo and you were there and I didn't know it.
No, I wasn't. I didn't make it to Gen Con this year.
Okay. So, Chris, you're the only one of the 5 of us who made it to Gen Con this year. So, in 5 minutes, tell us your highs and lows and how was the experience?
It was amazing. The place was packed. So attendance numbers were like 71,000 at last count. Star Trek Adventures 2nd edition flew off the shelves. My girlfriend and I went by the booth on Sunday. There was not a copy in sight. They only had about a half a dozen copies of the GM toolkit. Met with both April Hill and Chris Birch and John Kennedy. Chris was very pleased with how the game was received. In addition to that, I mean, there was a lot of stuff going on. There were multiple runs of the Gorgon's Gaze, which was the intro adventure, all sold out, except for one that my girlfriend got to play in, which and I have my girlfriend's copy.
Must be
second
nice.
edition right here.
Must be nice.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, she really wanted a copy of herself for herself, and I was happy to procure one for her.
And you said people were running the games, like multiple tables, different GMs running it.
Yeah, there were when I checked, there were like over 60. I want to say maybe 65 sessions of second edition being play tested. 1/4 of those were the adventure from second ed.
What?
And
That's
I got
awesome.
to speak with the G. Yeah, seriously. I got to speak with one of the GMs who'd run it multiple times. He said it was a good module. Said everybody he got to tell me some stories about some of the players' solutions to the thing. He did tell me about one that were a gentleman brought his young child, and of course the first thing he wants to do is phaser everybody.
Now, I think, Aaron, when we were there last year, I think that's more games running than we saw, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah. We only had a couple games that we specifically saw, but I think there were maybe like 4 or 5 on the schedule.
Wow, that's amazing. I didn't go to Gen Con this year, so it did not even occur to me to look at the schedule. And I am pleasantly surprised to hear that we had 65 on the schedule. I'm guessing, Chris, did you say it was a mix of Gorgon's Gaze and the Quick Start, the Celestial algorithm?
Well, I believe that was being run. I can't be 100% sure. I do know that like the Gorgon's Gaze was like 1 out of every 4 game sessions that was being play tested. There were also just a lot. There was one called Through Fire and Fury, which was which was basically just a straight up combat demo. But yeah, there was probably a Star Trek Adventures game being run probably once every hour, if I'm not wrong.
Wow, that's awesome. And the one you mentioned through Fire and Fury, Al, I don't remember the title, but Al and Allison Seib each wrote 4 short convention adventures last year, and I know we gave those to the Silver Shields this year to use at conventions, and we haven't updated them to second edition yet. We're working on it, but they've been running those at conventions as well, not just Gen Con but other ones. So I'm guessing it was probably a mix of the Gorgon's Gaze and some of those short one, and I think a few people have written their own as well, and we're running them. But I'm thrilled that they're out there. And I'm thrilled to hear your report. Really appreciate it. Did you get some photo ops at the booth with the backdrop and stuff?
Well, we did, yeah. There's a shot of just me with the book. There's one with me and my girlfriend. Cool. April was really sweet. Chris Birch was really nice. He was really, like I say, he was really pleased that the book was doing as well as it did. And we did get to look at the demo for Buffer Time. That is a for sure purchase. I'm telling you that right now. I can't say enough good things about that game.
Yeah. And I won't distract us from that. But yeah, so sounds great. I know that the PDFs have been selling well. I think over the weekend, the toolkit and the core book were 1 and 2 on Drive-Thru RPG, like throughout the entire weekend. I think there's a Cyberpunk game that's kind of like pushing it number 2, and I think the toolkit and Cyberpunk have been flip-flopping a bit, but yes, very gratified to hear the results. And like Michael said at the top of the show, everybody who pre-ordered it should probably have it in hand by the time this episode airs. And if you don't, email support, and they're working their way out there. We had to get a few copies air freighted, and we had to get a few copies on a boat, so they're getting out there. Just be patient. And thank you for your indulgence. And Michael, I think we can stop the.
That's where that's what we're here to talk about. Now that we've excited people and we got the buzz going, what we have going on for the next 4 weeks is, as we usually do with any release, chapter by chapter breakdown of the goodies, Easter eggs, things that excited us about the book. So Jim, you're familiar with all the different contributors of the book. Some of us are here. We were unfortunately unable to get match with Dr. Erin McDonald's schedule because she was, I think, fresh off of Star Trek Las Vegas, a really busy weekend, but she does say hello to everybody out there. She had a great time contributing to this book. So Jim, why don't you go ahead and lead it off? Because today we're going to be covering in this episode chapters 1 through 3 and chapter 10, the Gorgon's Gaze. That's how I say it every time, by the way, Chris.
I've got it.
Nice.
I've got it up on a PDF here, so I'll just kind of page through it, and we'll just talk about it, I guess, unless you have specific questions. And I'll get Alan, Aaron, and Chris to offer some commentary as well. First, I just want to point out that we couldn't get everybody on the show tonight. There's so many. Like, I love spreading the wealth and getting a lot of writers in here, and I'm really excited that we have a new writer joined us for this book. He's contributed to some sidebars, and that's Mike Ashkaway. Ashkiwi. Mike, forgive me if I mispronounce your name. I don't do it intentionally. But he was working with me on developing a standalone adventure, and while he was starting to work on that, he told me that he was he's stronger at fiction writing. And I was like, well, why don't you take an opportunity and write a couple sidebars for the core book? And I didn't tell him it was for the core book. I told him I wanted him to write some fiction sidebars. Yeah, I didn't tell him until later it was actually for the core book. But he did a great job. You'll see those sidebars, I think, in chapter 2, I think. But we'll page through here. So Mike couldn't be here tonight. Celia and Susan Bridges, love them both to death. They contributed some fantastic sidebars to the early chapters. Rachel Cruz contributed a chunk to what should have been chapter 1, but I had to cut it for space. But you'll be seeing her work in the coming weeks here on the blog, the Star Trek Modiphius blogs. We do a bunch of blog posts. She wrote a long sub-chapter about why playing specific species is the best species. So why should you play Klingons? Why should you play humans? Why should you play Cardassians? Whatever. Just to talk a little bit about the world and talk a little bit about the species and the culture, just to get people excited, especially newer fans to Star Trek who don't know the species that well. So you'll be seeing those blog posts coming up in the coming weeks. We wanted to make use of that content somewhere because it was so good, and it crushed my heart that I had to cut so much out of this book. So Rachel, couldn't be here. Let's see, and then Keith Garrett, he wrote most of the chapter on Starfleet, so we want to make sure to call him out. And of course, Dr. Aaron wrote the entire chapter on science, the whole science primer, as well as the sidebars in the science chapter. So as you read that, think about Dr. Aaron. And what's funny is I just finished watching the second season of Prodigy, and there was that whole episode where the Dr. Aaron character was introducing Temporal Mechanics 101. And I was like, oh, this is so exciting because, like,
that crazy?
Yeah, that tone that she was delivering in that episode was exactly what she did in our book. And I was just so excited that the book is coming out right about the same time Prodigy came out. Anyway, so let's just go ahead and jump into it. So the one of the things that surprised me about this book, about the fan reaction, is how many fans are reacting to the map. I mean, this is a 23rd century map, and people are like, where's Bajor? Where's Deep Space Nine? Where's all this stuff? It's like, well, it's a 23rd century map. DS9 hasn't even been built yet, but hopefully fans appreciate the cool map. And if not, that's okay. I'm working on Paramount to see if we can get some more maps, like from Picard and from Prodigy, and we'll see what happens at that point. But anyway, really cool map. Boring introduction, boring forward by some guy. Who cares? Usual thing about role playing. One thing I want to highlight about the introduction is if you are brand new to role playing and you want to ease into this game with a minimum number of mechanics, get yourself to page 8 that introduces the core mechanic of the game. Like the raw, simple baseline core mechanic of the game. I think we've talked about this, Michael, on a few shows, but you could probably run a perfectly happy Star Trek session using just the core mechanic with your groups. No momentum, no threat, no talents, nothing, just the core mechanic. I think you'd have a perfectly wonderful Star Trek experience at the table.
Yeah, so it's exactly what I do at game stores. Yeah. I just go in and do that base, just get them excited about the storytelling, and I keep it simple. 2d20 rolls. Yeah.
So he's in that fun Easter egg. All of the artwork in here was art directed by Ariel Orea, my fantastic art director who's been with us for a few years now. He did an amazing job of like leveling up the artwork. Not that the artwork was bad, but like just leveling up the artwork. And consistently, I've heard a lot of people online, fans and reviewers, talking about how good the artwork is. So I want to make sure that Ariel gets all the credit for that. as well as his artists. And it was a conscious decision on my part to make sure that we put an artist credit every single time you see a piece of art in the book, because I think the artists in RPG books don't get nearly enough credit.
Thank you for that, by the way. I love that this time. Yeah.
Yeah. Oftentimes you'll just see a big honking list of art names at the beginning of the book in the credits or something, and you'll have no idea who did which piece of art. I don't know. And it's like, if I want to give these artists more work, how do I do that? Like, how do I know who did what? Right. So I try to make it a little clearer which artist did which piece of art. So
can I ask, is this the first really RPG book to do that? Like, have any of the major lines ever done that?
Yeah, Wizards of the Coast did in at least in fourth edition D&D. I mean, that's where I got the idea from. Was if you look through any fourth edition D&D product, you'll see a great piece of art, and I'm pretty sure there's always an artist name right next to it or nearby it or something. I think they went away from it in fifth edition, but I haven't checked recently. I'd have to go back and look at my books. But no, we're not the first. But I think this is the first Star Trek Adventures product, anyway, that was explicit in pointing out who did what.
Yeah.
So,
I know, for friends, I have friends who are artists, and by you doing that, it actually makes it easier for them to get more work, because when people say, I like that style, they know exactly who it is. And just for people who do see this and maybe want to hand some work to these artists, most of them are on ArtStation. After I see their art here, I went and actually looked them up on ArtStation to see some of their other work. Yep. So it's kind of their calling card now.
Yep, absolutely. And they're all wonderful people to work with. So please, if you are looking for illustrations, and you like what you see in the books, then please reach out to them on ArtStation, or what's the other one? DeviantArt, I think, is another big one. So yeah, they're probably out there on the interwebs.
Jim, can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, of course.
I need to applaud you on the sheer diversity of creators that you got on this book. I think we've been trying to build that pool for several years, and to see all these different perspectives in one book, like looking at that list of everybody who has contributed, it's just inspiring and so truly Trek. So I appreciate you for doing that. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Al. I appreciate that. It's IDIC in action, right? I mean, it's diversity and it's inclusion. It's getting as many different voices as possible. And it's like, I think, I don't remember who it was. Somebody at Modifius joked with me about how every time I do a book, I end up with like 20 different purchase orders and invoices for writers. And it's like, well, I could give it to like 3 people. Like I know a lot of RPG companies, you see a piece of work, or you see a product and it's got like 2 names on it. And it's like, and that's okay, right? For certain products, but like, this is Star Trek. Our diversity is our strength, right? And so the more voices I can get into the books, the better, even if it means more paperwork for me.
Hey, because think of it this way: we're a crew, right? We all work together. It's a lot of people working together for a greater purpose.
Exactly. And I'm not gonna lie, doing 20 purchase orders is a pain in the butt, but it's worth it because I can see the quality of the work, and the fans notice. And so, Al, thank you for mentioning that. I really appreciate it. But yeah, super diverse.
Yeah. Before you go, I don't know how long you're going to talk about the art for, but I do want to call out my favorite piece of art, which is on page 10, done by Paolo Pugioni. I'm assuming they're Italian, so I'm going to say Pugioni. And it's the crew from the Quick Start. It's the USS Challenger crew, which of course we're playing. People have noticed we've been playing on continuing missions. And I looked at this, I'm basing an entire story just off of this picture. And I love when a story does this. Each character is, there from the Quick Start. So that's my favorite one.
Yep. And I liked it so much. We used that same piece of art on the cover of the Quick Start. Because I mean, why not? Right. It's so pretty. Anyway, one quality of life thing. One of the design intentions going into this book was that it be a useful tool as well as a good core book. And to that end, I divided it into three big chunks, right? The first chunk is the lore. The second chunk is the mechanics and the rules and building the character and the ships and stuff. And then the third part is the game mastering stuff. And in working with the design team, with Michal Cross being the lead, we decided to color code those 3 parts. So the first chunk of the book is blue, the second chunk is red, the third chunk is gold, course, red, blue, gold, the 3 department colors for Starfleet. And so hopefully, even as you're just kind of like flipping through the book, just by visually seeing what color, now, of course, this is, specific for people who can see color, right? Obviously, we weren't able to quite accommodate folks that are colorblind, and that's always a work in progress. But so the first chunk of the book is blue. So if you're in the blue section of the book, oh, this is primary lore. If I want mechanics, I go dig into the red stuff. If I want game master advice or NPCs or something, I'll flip to the back of the book for the gold. So we're trying to make the book a useful tool as well as just a good book to read. You'll see the index is more robust than we're used to doing. I will admit that indexing I tend to fall behind on because it's usually the last thing we do, and that's when we're almost out of time. But the design team, because they're clever and because they've been developing books for Modiphius for 8 years now, they came upon a new process that they wanted to experiment with on building indexes for books, and we tested it out on the core book, and I think it came out pretty good. Like if you look at the index, and you also see that the designers were intentional about hyperlinking everything in that index. So that's another useful tool, hopefully, that folks will appreciate. Last I checked, the bookmarks are pretty robust. I think we went down like either 3 or 4 header levels. So hopefully that's another useful tool for folks. So again, just trying to put utility into the book as well as, what do they call it? Form and function. Not form over function, but form plus function. Yeah, something like that. I don't know what the phrase is. But anyway, let's jump into it. So Aaron wrote the bulk of chapter 1 in terms of the essentials, if I remember right. So Aaron, you want to talk a little bit about the first chunk? I know a lot of this was a revision and rewrite of what we did in the Player Guide, Game Master Guide, and Captain's Log. But I know you brought a lot of fresh stuff to it. So you want to talk a little bit and I'll shut up?
No, yeah. I mean, I thought it was an interesting assignment in that I'm usually like, again, the technology or starship or science guy. So I got to write like some of the soft science stuff, which I touched on a little bit in the science division, but like writing about culture and the economy, how all that functions in the Federation and nearby polities. I really enjoyed doing that. I think the one thing that I wrote that I think is, well, maybe not an Easter egg, but one thing I thought that was important was writing this idea of the economic prime directive that the Federation has. Since they're a post-scarcity society, they can unduly influence nearby polities' economies that might not use replicators or might not be post-scarcity. So think about like the Ferengi or something like that, that in general, the Federation could come in and just swamp their markets with goods or cheap labor of sorts, and they don't do that. We clearly see that they don't do that. So there has to be some sort of economic prime directive. I also wrote a little bit about like spirituality or religion in the Federation and how to include it in your game. How you might want to be sensitive to real life religions if you're portraying that in your game, how society works, how characters that are in the Federation are, while they might be a specific species, they're likely very multicultural. So, one of the examples might be that I give is that you're an Andorian that might like Vulcan soup, and you listen to Klingon opera, and you practice an Earth religion just because that's the way you were brought up, or whatever. But the Federation is incredibly multicultural, and it's a giant melting pot. And I loved writing about that. But then I did get into a little bit of technology at the end with communication technology and holograms and the Universal Translator, and why these are very important for Federation society as a whole. When you have so many different species and cultures, the Universal Translator is a must, really, for everyone to be able to be understood.
I love prompting questions. I noticed one of the things you wrote with this one was in a lot of it, you ask questions to the reader. And so it kind of gives the opportunity for a game master to think, oh, that's a problem I could introduce to the crew. I love that technique in an RPG book. So that was really well done, Aaron.
Yeah, I like it in RPG books too, because it's not just not to say it's dry, but it's not just history, and it's not just lore. It's actually pulling the reader in to make them, especially since this first chunk of the book is aimed at new gamers and new people new to Star Trek. It helps them to think about what they're doing and what they want to play before they get to chapter 4 and start building their character. Hopefully this is giving them a foundation to start thinking about stuff. So good job. And again, the sidebars, it was a mix of sidebars by Susan and Tilly Bridges and Mike Ashkaway. So don't sleep on the sidebars. They're really cool. Really good representations of diversity and perspectives on Starfleet and the Federation and just Star Trek in general. So that takes us to chapter 1-2, Noble Civilizations. I believe J.D. Kennedy wrote a chunk of this, especially the lore about the Klingons and the Federation and the Romulans, etc. They're really good at that, and it was nice to include as much as we could in here. Of course, we did focus on some of the newer species that we included in the book, because now there's an opportunity to play Orions and Klingons and Romulans right out of the core, as opposed to waiting for a supplement.
I think it was also, I saw a lot of people remarking on page 24 about the turning point with the Romulan Empire. I think this is the first time it's covered, again, with allowing a lot of fodder for people. I know our game plays post Romulan Star and all the political changes from that. And I see John Kennedy went deep on that on page 24, which is really cool for those of you interested in exploring Romulans.
Yeah. Yep. Want to make sure we included that. Let's see what we want to talk about. Dominion, other civilizations, eras of play. Al, I think you wrote the bulk of this, if I remember right. Again, it's been been a year, and
this was my section in the book. As someone who I love writing mechanics and things like that, but obviously Nathan took the head on this book with that. So this was my little chapter, and Jim basically said, hey, take all the galactic superpowers for each century and write a brief synopsis about what happens each century. So a lot of information crammed in here. One of the things that I was trying to do was to expand our Star Trek Adventures canon to include a little bit of beta canon that's out there. So you'll notice that when we first start talking about the birth of the Federation and whatnot, we do bring in just a little bit about the Romulan War. And how that played out briefly. One of the things that I wanted to do was to help game masters is, like, if you're not sure what era you want to play in, some general themes that occur with each era. There's a little sidebar for those. So if you know your players are really into like a Wild West type campaign, you're probably going to want to look at some of the earlier centuries, and so on and so forth. If you want some exploration and weird science type stuff, you probably want to be looking at TOS TNG era or TOS or Strange New Worlds era. So I went through it and did a lot here. I talked about there's a whole page sidebar on technology from each century and how it kind of like advances. Aaron was my savior here. I kept bouncing ideas off of him the whole time to make sure that I had things clear in my own head. But my favorite thing is when I get to 2300 to 2399 on page 35. This was where I was able to start reaching out to some of our friends from other Star Trek IPs or games out there. So I reached out to Thomas Mahoney to talk about what happens with the Romulan Empire on Star Trek Online, and so I tried to get that in there. In the 25th century stuff, I reached out to Jackson Lansing to talk about Day of Blood and how is the new Star Trek comic. So I got a little bit of that in there. So it was really cool to figure out where all those pieces fit along the timeline. And of course, Jackson and Thomas were amazing. Like I would send them an email and have an email back within an hour. So they're all super excited about getting a little bit of their beta canon into our Star Trek adventure books, which is cool.
And I know that a number of fans are excited to see those Easter eggs because it shows them that Star Trek Online and the comic series and the RPG, they're all kind of interconnected. And it's just, partly because we've just been so fortunate that everyone's excited about the RPG and have been willing to work with us on it over these last 8 years, right? It's crazy.
Was this the first time too, Al? I got to ask, on page 37 snuck in something about the Kelvin timeline there?
That's right. Yeah. So this was where I was going back and forth with Jim, because I was like, do we actually have this license now? And he's like, yes. And I'm like, can I talk about it in this section? And he said, absolutely. So I kind of embraced that and made sure that I got it in there.
Wait a second, news release. Can we actually talk, Jim? We have Kelvin timeline?
I mean, yeah, it's that's why we put it in the core book, and there's one of the ships is in the toolkit.
I was unaware of this. I'm sorry, everyone. Hold on. Wait a second. Wait. Are you telling me it's possible? I'm not saying it's happening. Because I don't know. Everyone, I'm equally as shocked in case you're hearing this for the first time, because I've seen the talk on social media.
I'm sorry.
Are you telling me that it's not out of the realm of possibility that there could be a Kelvin timeline core rulebook? Not core rulebook, but supplement? It's not impossible. That's all I'm asking. I'm not saying if it's happening.
It's not impossible. Yeah, I mean, it's part of our license.
What?
Yeah.
Oh man. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. So
continue. I need to absorb this. Go ahead. Continue.
I mean, especially because it was mentioned in Discovery, we wanted to, make sure that it was in here in its own regard. And yeah, I'm super excited about it.
Yeah. And Aaron, I don't know if you need to cover your ears or not, but there was a conversation recently online. So in my perspective, I haven't talked to Nathan, but in my perspective anyway, the original series Constitution, the Strange New Worlds version of the Constitution, the Constitution refit, and the Constitution you see in the JJ verse movies, it's the same picture. They're all the same stats. So
oh no, I agree.
Different perspectives.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Because I know some fans are like, but no, the JJ verse ship is so much bigger, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, it's all the same. It's okay.
Yep. No, I fully agree.
I'm sorry. I'm in my mind statting out Yorktown Station. I'm blown away by this. Okay. I'm stunned. Keep going.
And just in case any viewers and listeners aren't aware, like everything Star Trek that you see on screen is canon. And also canon for the purposes of the RPG. So you may not like it, and that's okay, but it's still canon.
Yeah,
so let's move on.
So one other cool thing that I was able to do was to kind of provide a link between the Texas class starship that we saw from Lower Decks, and how that kind of predisposed the Federation's outlook to have them move forward with a synthetic ban after the incident. So just piecing little connective tissue together, I think was the fun challenge of this section.
You had me at Kelvin timeline. I'm literally done, Jim. You got to take the rest of the show. You got to lead this. My mind's spinning off now. So it's yeah.
Let's see. We developed this book before season 5 of Discovery came out and before season 2 of Prodigy came out. So I mean, that's just the unfortunate reality of working on an RPG with an active production schedule in place, right? And because of our timelines and stuff. So if you're excited for Prodigy, of course, I am. If you were excited for the last season of Discovery, again, I was. We just couldn't. There just wasn't, the timeline didn't work for us to get it all in there. So we'll just stay tuned. Hopefully future products will be able to add that content, but did the best we could with what we had. The section on 2500 and beyond, there's some nice bits in there about season 4 of Discovery, with the species 10C, so that at least has some cool information in there. And hopefully, knock on wood, we'll get to explore the 32nd century in much more detail in a future product. It really depends on what happens with Starfleet Academy, because we understand that Starfleet Academy series is also going to be set in the 32nd century. And in fact, I think I just read a press release that some of the characters from Discovery are going to be on that show as recurring characters, or at least guest stars. I think we're gonna see Tilly and the Admiral, Oded Fair, and Reno, and there was somebody else. I just drew a blank. But some of the common characters.
DMH.
What's that? Oh, the EMH. Oh, yeah, that's right. Robert Picardo's joining in, so that'll be an interesting little fun thing to do. So, anyway, so Starfleet Chapter 2 is all about Starfleet. This was Keith Garrett's effort, along with some sidebars, and this is a good summary of Starfleet. Obviously, if you want more information about Starfleet, go grab the science operations and command source books from first edition. All that information, all that lore is still 100% relevant. So I thought about not including this chapter because we were really trying to make the game broader beyond just Starfleet. But the more I stared at it, the more I realized that, like, even now after 60 years, the vast majority of Star Trek is still focused on Starfleet. It's either Starfleet core or Starfleet adjacent, and I thought we would be doing the franchise a disservice if we didn't at least spend a little bit of time talking about what Starfleet is, what a Starfleet character can do, what makes them cool and interesting, and so that's why I decided to retain it and keep it in here. So a lot of good information in here about Starfleet. Hopefully it'll be enough to get people started, but I will be the first to admit that I have been doing Star Trek for a long time, and I may not be the most objective person to say, yeah, this is enough to get you started. So I'll rely on the fans to tell us if we gave them enough or just not enough, right? So we'll see how that goes.
I've heard a lot of positive comments online of people saying they're enjoying just reading the starting chapters. So that's been nice to hear. Long-term people. And again, for some people, this is their first time ever playing the game too, and they're enjoying it. So that's really cool.
Yeah. And these sub-chapter quotes are just home runs. Every single one of them. I love seeing what the quotes are, and like they're all just spot on.
I think I've talked about it, but I will admit that is one of the fun things to do while putting the polish on the book is like all the writers, like all of you guys do a great job of sourcing quotes. And I think probably 95 times out of 100, I'll go with the one that you picked because it's appropriate. But sometimes just in the challenge of cutting and pasting and moving things around and massaging the text, sometimes another quote will come to me that seems to fit the subject matter a little bit better, and I'll replace it. But that is one of the great joys that I like to see in these books, is that we put really good quotes. I mean, it doesn't hurt that we have 60 years worth of Star Trek to pull on, right? And don't think for an instant that I wasn't watching second season of Prodigy, pausing it every 5 minutes to write down new quotes, because like that entire season is full of great pull quotes.
Well, I know I literally tried to find the most obscure ones, even from I tried to find ones from one-shot characters who said something in one obscure thing that related to it, and so it's fun seeing what actually makes it in.
I had a lot of fun. It's a non sequitur, but I had fun with the quick start during the episode, The Game, where Wesley is dealing with that apparatus from the Katarians. Nurse Ogawa has it, and she said it's just a game. If you don't force it, it's fun, or something. Whatever that quote was. And I was like, well, that's a perfect quote for the opening chapter of the quick start, where it's introducing the game, right? It's just kind of meta, and I like having fun with that sometimes. Anyway, so non sequitur for you guys.
Hey Jim, while we're here, can you talk to the new style of sidebar that we've put in here from the character perspectives just for a moment?
Yeah, sure. So again, this was Michal Cross took the lead on the design, the overall look and feel. And he's been working on Star Trek pretty much from the beginning. And he helped, or he was the primary lead designer on the Klingon core book design and this one. And I think maybe Utopia, like most of the interior designs that you've seen us use over the years, he's been a key part of it. And so like we were looking at it and we're like, okay, well, we know we have several types of sidebars, right? We've got rules sidebars, we've got sidebars that are like in setting fiction, and then we've got sidebars that are aimed at the reader to like give them more information. And so we decided to color code those different sidebars. So you'll see blue sidebars are like lore information. The kind of teal colored ones are setting and in setting fiction. And then the red ones are usually mechanics, right? So the intent there, of course, is again trying to make it a useful tool so that you're seeing like maybe you'll read a rules sidebar that's red, and maybe your brain muscle memory will help you remember where it was placed on the page so that it's easier for you to flip to it. Or if you see that it's a blue sidebar, you're like, oh, that's a lore or setting sidebar. I can read that. Or if you just want to kick back and like our friends over at Dice and Mind, Brad and Jason talk about RPG as literature. If you want to just read it for the sake of reading it, for reading something fun, focus on the teal sidebars and just read the fiction. In fact, as we get to chapter 3, one of my challenges to Dr. Aaron, in addition to writing, a really awesome primer on science in Star Trek, I wanted her to write several sidebars, fiction sidebars that were linked, right? That told a story from one sidebar to another sidebar in the space of like 5 or 6 sidebars. And so if you read those 5 or 6 sidebars, the teal ones in the science book, you'll get a little bit of a story. And the story doesn't come to an end, because it's my secret hope that we will continue that story in future products and supplements, so that you'll see these little touchstones all throughout second edition about all this interesting things that are happening. I'm not confident at this point if we'll actually come to a resolution of that story, because I kind of want game masters and players to take that and run with it and go, oh, we built on that. We read that sidebar on chapter 3 of the core book, and we built on it and we added it to our own campaign. I think that's really what I would love to see happen with it, as opposed to us telling the story and then just, okay, here it is. Right. I'd rather getting a feedback loop on it. Anyway, so yeah, chapter 3, all about science. If you're familiar with Dr. Aaron, she's been on our show a couple of times. She's a resident science advisor for all things Star Trek right now. If you've been watching Prodigy, she actually appears in the show as Dr. Aaron. She's a lieutenant in Starfleet, which is super cool. And especially in season 2, there was a chunk of an episode where she was talking all about temporal mechanics, and it was really well done, I thought, and I'm just glad that she had room in her calendar to write this for us, and I'm super excited to get this out there, because I think Star Trek has always had that scientific underpinning to it, even if it's got real science, and then it's got the quasi science that feels good, and then you've also got plausible science where if you just take it and you extend on it. Aaron, any thoughts you wanted to add on the science piece of it?
No, I think that whole section is great. Yeah, it's great. I love that she went into the detail on like time travel that she did in that section. So yeah, thumbs up.
Nice. And then, so that's chapters 1 through 3 in the intro, and then we can jump. Obviously, since Chris, we've got you here, and you've been so patient waiting for us to get through the first 3 chapters here. we can jump all the way to near the end of the book to the intro adventure. And of course, I always, and I'm not the only one at Modifius, but I think if you're writing a core rule book, you really need to have an adventure in it to at least show game masters and players what is your intentions with the game. How do you think it should be run, as opposed to just like throwing the core book and the rules out there and having players and game masters kind of guess, right, and hope that they get it right. I think it's important to provide a really solid example of how the designers think the game should be played. And this is something I was thinking about, especially late in, this is an Easter egg for y'all, late into the layout of the book, where we realized we were way over on page count. I had a late night where I was like, do I cut the adventure and make it a downloadable, just make it a download as part of the package? And I racked my brain on it, and I was like, no, we've got to have it in here, because I know that there is a huge portion of the Star Trek Adventures audience that is not engaged online, right? They're happily out there buying the book, playing the game. They're not engaged on Reddit or Facebook or even the official forums or the Discord. And it would be a disservice to them if we didn't have an adventure in the book, because then we're forcing them to go online. And I mean, even though it's the 21st century, a lot of people don't have reliable internet access, or B, just don't want to go online to get game stuff, and they'd rather have it in print, right? So absolutely decided to keep it in the book. And of course, Chris, you wrote a great adventure, so I wanted to make sure as many people as possible got a chance to see your hard work, right? But I guess that's just an encouragement for all game designers and wannabe game designers out there, if you have the ability to do so, put an introductory adventure in your book. Don't rely on the internet or don't rely on a free download or something to cover the bases. Somehow get it into the book and give your fans a chance to see what your intent, like what did you intend. I mean, it's one thing to write rules, right? It's one thing to write mechanics, and it's one thing to write lore, but show us what your vision is for an adventure in your world, in your setting, so that they can then emulate that as they go off and play it. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. Chris, I'm going to stop talking here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this adventure and what you wanted to do with it, and any other cool thoughts you have about it?
Yeah, well, so it was called The Gorgon's Gaze. My mission statement on that was basically it had to be set in the Strange New Worlds era. No ship combat, and my own take on it was to do something. Basically, I want to do kind of a mashup of two story types that Star Trek seems to do very well. One being a medical mystery, and another being the interaction with a pre-warp culture. And I also wanted to give the characters a kind of a lead NPC that was more than just a quest giver. This was without going into too many spoilers. You guys run into a geneticist that's embedded on a pre-warp in a pre-warp world that has potentially done something horrible to the people he was just supposed to be observing, and he's been there and he's bound and determined to fix the problem if it was something that he caused. And he's not leaving until he was expected to leave, but he's not leaving until he fixes this, and then it becomes the player character's problem as well as his. So I wanted to give something that allowed the players to explore all the different mechanics of the game. I included an optional combat scene if the GM thought, hey, let's throw some action in this. But I also wanted there to be kind of an emotional underpinning. I wanted you're seeing something happen to a planet that probably did not ask for what happened to them at all, and it becomes I believe I named one of the sections of the adventure, it becomes a duty of care. But at the same time, as you are playing Starfleet officers, you're of course have to be Prime Directive compliant. So you got to really walk on eggshells to solve this problem, while still and Starfleet Command may just up and say you end up one of those with those stereotypical bad admirals who basically says, hey, look, you're a hair's breadth from stepping over the Prime Directive. We're going to pull you guys out. So it also becomes a little bit of like a political game playing, because I give the option of you having to talk with the sector commander of this of the sector of space, who is one step away from saying get out, and convince this person, hey, look, we could be responsible for this, something that these people don't even know of life outside the sky.
And you said that you had some feedback from it already from Gen Con, right? Did you get some prelim feedback?
Yeah, sure. I got told it was very easy to go through. I mean, the mysteries were easily solvable. Like I said, my girlfriend got to play in a session of it, so I got to get some direct feedback from her and the other players and the GM. They said that they managed to get it pretty well, but they did tell me that full disclosure that they rolled really well, and they made ample use of the momentum mechanics. So they were able to they actually got through the Gorgon's Gaze inside of an hour.
Whoa. Okay, that's a really good convention game then.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm surprised.
So
one of the compliments I was going to give you, Chris, is even when I was reading it in manuscript and then it came together in layout, is that it's a fairly short adventure, right? But it's dense, right? I mean, there's just so much stuff in here that you can expand upon. Like I know my group. If I were to run this for my group, this would probably be 2-3 hour sessions at least, because they would get into the role playing and the stuff with the villagers and the ethical dilemmas with the doctor and stuff. And I'm impressed to hear that somebody ran it inside an hour at a convention. But I appreciate that. I mean, all of you do this really, really well, where you have a fairly short assignment, but you pack every single paragraph full of potential stuff, right? And I think as a game master and a player, I love that, because it gives me more stuff to work with. So thank you for that. And Al, I may have cut you off, Al. I apologize. No? Okay. What else, Chris? Any other thoughts?
No, I'm just as pleased that everybody's like really getting into it. What's funny is like my girlfriend basically said, "Okay, Chris, you got to leave. I don't want you here giving me like facial expressions or any tells or anything. I don't want to know that I'm doing well. I don't want to know why I'm doing bad. I want to go in this completely cold." She went. We actually got our copy of 2E on day 1 of the convention. The adventure was run on day 3, and she would not crack the book open until she finished. She played the adventure. But I got to speak to the GM who was running it. There were many different routes to the goal that different parties took. Weirdly enough, the group that my girlfriend was playing with came up with a solution to like dispense the cure for the disease that I hadn't thought of.
Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert for people who haven't played it.
No, that's it.
Good. All right, we actually let you tell more than we've ever let anyone tell about any mission module.
I'm sorry.
But it's okay. It's so well written. What I like about it is your confidence building for people to pick this up and game master a game. Like, now that you've heard how well constructed it is, they can be played in an hour. I ask people if Chris said that there were like 65 games playing, suppose 5 people played in each game, 4 to 5 people each game, that's 300 new people. That's 300 new fans of Star Trek Adventure. So very powerful when you write a powerful and popular adventure, in that you're getting more people brought into the genre.
Yeah, and I do want to note, I think I don't think we had the space to explicitly call out the fact that if you're running a game or a campaign that's not in the Strange New Worlds era, this would not be hard at all to adapt to a different era of play. In fact, it probably would not be that hard to adapt this to like a Klingon game or a Romulan game or a Cardassian game or something. Like some of the stakes would change, and some of the interactions with the characters would change, because obviously you'd be bringing a different perspective to it, right? Like, certain species may not care as much about the risk of contaminating the indigenous population, right? But there's enough here. Of course, maybe not a novice game master, but a game master a little bit more experienced with Star Trek Adventures could probably take this adventure and very easily turn it into something else for their crew if needed. Again, just trying to highlight the fact that we've tried over the 8 years to make all of our adventures flexible. And I think, Chris, even though you wrote this one specifically for Starfleet in the Strange New Worlds era, it's pretty easy to adapt it if needed.
Yeah, and owing to that, because I did notice that because my girlfriend and I were the first people to arrive at the table, and they had like the pre-gens listed, and one of them was a Bajoran, which, as you know, Bajorans were not integrated in as much into Federation society. So I kind of thought that they were maybe running this as a little bit more of an era agnostic adventure rather than the era as written. So that's just proof positive that you could adapt this to any era, and I think that's in writing adventures. This is like my third. That's something I always kind of strive for, is to be able to adapt this to any era or any polity, and I'm hoping I accomplish that with this one as well.
Absolutely. And if anybody gets anxious about why their Bajoran is playing in the Strange New Worlds era or something, have them look at the cover of the new core book and just use the Guardian
Bingo.
Forever as your excuse. There you go. Any era, it's like time travel. Time travel is a thing, right? So just make it happen.
All right, good stuff from chapters 1 through 3 and chapter 10. Thank you, everyone, for coming on. Let's do some gratitude and wrap up knowing that we have 3 weeks looking forward with Nathan Dowdell, the game designer, who's going to be joining us to break down the new game mechanics. Should I say new, or should I say the streamlined game mechanics of 2E? So a lot of good details, a lot more Easter eggs coming your way. My gratitude today is actually to the artists. Again, I love looking at each piece of art that provokes storytelling. We're playing the USS Challenger. We know myself, Jim Johnson, BC Holmes, Al Spader, Merrick Moyer. And believe me, I'm looking at any picture that references this crew in this book, and I'm going to be piecing together the story of our adventure from there. And again, I couldn't do it without these huge list of interior artwork artists. Please open the book, look at each name. They're worth taking the time to appreciate their art. Let's move on to gratitude to Aaron Pollyea.
I'll send out a gratitude to my local game store, Hoplite Games, here in Lansing, who, great people. I love being able to actually walk there from my house. I don't have to drive. It's that close. And being able to just go up there, check out new games, talk to everybody that's there. Boy, I should be running Star Trek Adventures there at some point. So gratitude to them.
Very cool. Very cool. Al.
All right, I've got a couple today that I want to give a shout out to. First things first, Bill Barbado, the Final Frontiersman, just turned in his manuscript for an adventure for Sentience that we're going to be putting together probably with the director's screen. And it was it knocked my socks off. It was so good. So I'm so excited to get that out into the world. And then definitely Jackson Lansing and Thomas Maroney. I couldn't have gotten all of that cool, like peripheral beta canon stuff into our core rule book without you. So I appreciate you each responding to my emails and the little specifics that I was asking about, and giving me a little preview for what was to come as well. So thank you.
Yep. Gotta love our tight-knit Star Trek community. Chris.
This was an easy call. My gratitude goes to one Miss Sarah Arnold, my girlfriend. She accompanied me to Gen Con. She was in her element, like you cannot believe. I mean, she's a fellow nerd. She's actually she's a junior high science and engineering teacher. She's an amazing educator, an amazing parent. She was just absorbing everything, and I couldn't have asked for a better partner for Gen Con or in life in general. And a shout out to the guys who produce Dreams and Machines from Modiphius, because you made a sale with my girlfriend. So thanks again.
Love to hear that. Fun game. I have it to give it to my niece, and we're gonna bust it open and play it. All right, Jim, take us out.
All right, guys, there's so many people to thank. I think I want to thank everybody at Modiphius who went to Gen Con and set up the booth, worked the booth all weekend long, closed down the booth, promoted Star Trek and Fallout and Dreams and Machines and all the other games, all the volunteer staff that showed up to help out, everybody at Gen Con who was running the game. And I didn't even realize that we had 65 odd people running the game. So thank you all for running the game and getting people excited about it. So thank you for all of that. Thank you to the leadership at Modiphius for greenlighting second edition, and thank you to the fans for making second edition possible. Right, if the fan response hadn't been what it is over the last 7 years, there's no way we would have done a second edition. So thanks to all the fans, of course, and then thanks to everybody involved in actually making the thing, the writers, the artists, the designers, the developers, all the staff at Modiphius who who often go unheralded, but are managing the web stores, they're managing the PR, they're managing the social media accounts, just all the production, the logistics, like all the pieces that you don't see on screen like this, and are talking about the books, right? There's a lot of, I mean, if you look at the credits page, there's like Modiphius has almost 100 staff people, right? And almost every one of them have their hands on Star Trek Adventures at one point or another. So make sure you thank all of them as well. But yeah, and thanks to all the writers who couldn't be on the show or aren't on the show. You all did great work. I'm very proud of all of you. I'm very grateful that you're all with me on this crazy trip for as long as it'll last. But more than anything else, thanks to the fans. So thanks for being there for us. And we will do our level best not to let you down and to give you some awesome Star Trek gaming for as long as we can. So have fun. Enjoy it.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for another continuing conversation. Until next time, IDIC.
Live long and prosper. Be safe. Be well. We'll see you all next time.